can't believe you'd say that to me.
Why are you doing this?
This is a story of a good woman, a mother's love, a love so deep and so strong that it was built upon a great secret. The woman's name was Veronica, and the son she adored was named Steve. Veronica had given him a name, a home, and a life she had built just for him. She loved him more than her own life, and she had promised herself that she would take her secret to the grave to protect him from a truth she believed would shatter his world. But she never imagined that one day her son, her precious boy, would be the one to shatter hers with his own two hands. I promise you, this is a powerful and emotional journey. It is a story about sacrifice, betrayal, and the painful, complicated truth of what it means to be a family. So please, get comfortable and let us begin. And if you are new to our channel, we would be so happy if you would subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Please give this story a thumbs up if it touches your heart. Veronica was 64 years old. She had never been married. In her younger years, she had always dreamed of having a family, of having a child to love and care for. But life, sometimes, does not follow our dreams. The right man never came along, and the years began to pass. But the desire in her heart to be a mother never faded. It was a small, warm light that never went out. So, when she was in her late 30s, she made a decision, a brave and beautiful decision. She went to an orphanage, a home for children who had no one, and she told them she wanted to adopt a baby. The day they placed a tiny 3-month-old baby boy in her arms, Veronica's world changed forever. He was so small, so perfect. He had a little tuft of dark hair and big, curious eyes. When she held him, he wrapped his tiny hand around her finger, and in that moment, Veronica's heart overflowed with a love she had never known was possible. She named him Steve. The people at the orphanage told her what little they knew about him. They told her that he had been found abandoned, left in a place where no baby should ever be, in a trash can. They had tried to find his parents, but they could not. He was all alone in the world. Veronica looked down at the tiny baby sleeping in her arms, and she made a silent promise to him. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. "I am your mother now. I will love you forever. I will protect you always, and I will never, ever let you go." She decided right then that she would never tell him how he came into her life. Why would she? It was a story of sadness and abandonment. She would give him a new story, a story that began and ended with her love. He would be her son, and she would be his mother, and that was all the truth he would ever need. Veronica was a wonderful mother. She worked as a school librarian, a job she loved because it was quiet and she was surrounded by stories. But her real life, her most important job, began when the school bell rang at the end of the day. Her whole world revolved around Steve. She would pack his lunch every morning, always including a little note that said, "Have a great day, my sweet boy. Love, Mom." When he was small, she would read him bedtime stories every single night, her gentle voice bringing tales of brave knights and magical lands to life. She taught him how to ride a bike in the park, holding on to the back of the seat and running behind him until he could finally pedal on his own. She cheered the loudest at his school football games, even when it was cold and raining. She helped him with his homework at the kitchen table, patiently explaining math problems until he understood. Everything she had, she gave to him. She did not have a lot of money, but Steve never felt like he was missing anything. He had something much more valuable than money. He had a mother who adored him completely. And Steve grew up to be a good man, or so she thought. He was handsome and smart. He did well in school and went to a good college. He got a job as a manager at a large shipping company, and he made a very good salary. Veronica was so proud, her heart could have burst. She would look at this tall, successful man and still see the tiny baby who had wrapped his little hand around her finger. All her hard work, all her sacrifices, it had all been worth it. Her son was happy. He was successful. Her life was complete. Then, when Steve was 28 years old, he brought a woman home to meet her. Her name was Jessica. The first time Veronica saw Jessica, she noticed her beauty. She was tall and slim, with long blonde hair and clothes that looked very expensive. Veronica, in her simple dress, opened the door with a warm, welcoming smile. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you, Jessica," Veronica said, her voice full of kindness. "Steve has told me so much about you." Jessica smiled, but her smile did not reach her eyes. Her eyes quickly scanned Veronica's small, cozy home, from the handmade quilts on the sofa to the simple wooden furniture. It was a look that Veronica did not quite understand, but it made her feel a little uncomfortable. They all sat down for dinner. Veronica had spent the whole day cooking Steve's favorite meal, roast chicken with mashed potatoes and gravy. But Jessica barely touched her food. She pushed the potatoes around on her plate and complained quietly that she was on a special diet. During the meal, Veronica tried to make conversation. She asked Jessica about her life, about her family, about her job. "Oh, I don't have a job," Jessica said with a little laugh, as if the idea was silly. "My time is far too valuable for that." Later, while they were having dessert, Jessica looked at Veronica and said, "You know, I've always said that all mother-in-laws are the same. They are all evil. They just want their sons to be little puppets, to do whatever they want. They can't stand it when another woman comes into their son's life." Veronica was so shocked she did not know what to say. She looked at Steve, expecting him to say something to defend her. But Steve just gave a nervous little laugh. "Oh, Jessica's just joking, Mom," he said. But Veronica knew that Jessica was not joking. She could see it in the cold, hard look in her eyes. This woman did not like her, and she had decided not to like her before she had even met her. A few months later, Steve and Jessica got married. It was a very quick wedding. Veronica felt a sense of dread, a deep worry in her heart, but she kept it to herself. She wanted her son to be happy. They moved into a big, new house that Steve bought. Veronica thought that her son, now a married man, would not need her as much. But she soon found out that was not the case. The argument started almost immediately. Jessica wanted more, always more, a more expensive car, a more luxurious vacation, more designer clothes. And she continued to say terrible things about Veronica. Steve would come to visit his mother, his face full of worry. "Jessica says you are trying to break us up," he would tell her. "She says you call me all the time just to control me." "That's not true, my son," Veronica would say, her heart aching. "I only call to see how you are. I love you." The final argument happened just 3 months after the wedding.
Jessica told Steve that he had to make a choice. It was either her, his wife, or his mother. She said she could not live in a marriage where his mother was so important. She told him that if he truly loved her, he would cut Veronica out of his life completely. Steve came to Veronica's house that night. His eyes were red and his face was full of pain. He told her what Jessica had said. "I told her no," Steve said, his voice firm. "I told her that you are my mother. You are the most important person in my world. I would never, ever abandon you for anyone." Veronica hugged her son tightly, tears of relief and love in her eyes. But she also knew what this meant. A few days later, Steve told her that Jessica had left him. They were getting a divorce. The year after the divorce was hard for Steve. He was heartbroken and lonely in that big, empty house. Veronica's heart ached for him. So she made another decision, another act of love. She packed a few suitcases and moved in with him. "Just for a little while," she told him. "Just until you are feeling better. No son of mine should be all alone. I will be here to cook for you and keep the house nice. We will get through this together." And for a while it was good. It was like old times. They would eat dinner together every night, and Steve would tell her about his day. He started to smile again. The sadness in his eyes began to fade. Veronica was so happy to be there, to be taking care of her son. She felt needed. She felt that she had healed his broken heart. She had no idea that a much darker storm was gathering, a storm that would change everything forever.
For almost a year, Steve Big House felt like a real home again. The heavy silence left behind by Jessica was filled with the warm, comforting sounds of life. There was the gentle clatter of dishes as Veronica cooked in the kitchen, the soft humming of the vacuum cleaner, and most importantly, there was laughter. Steve was laughing again. Veronica's presence was like the morning sun after a long, dark night. She did not ask for anything. She simply gave. She would wake up early every morning to make Steve a proper breakfast before he went to work. She would pack him a lunch, just like she did when he was a boy. When he came home in the evening, tired from his long day, a delicious hot meal would be waiting for him on the table. She would listen to him talk about his work, about his problems with his employees, or about a funny thing that happened during his day. She would listen with her whole heart, her eyes full of love and support. The house was clean, the laundry was always done, and there was a feeling of peace that had been missing for a very long time. Steve seemed to heal. The deep sadness in his eyes was replaced by a familiar sparkle. He started going out with his old friends again on the weekends. He would come home and tell his mother, "You were right, Mom. I feel so much better. Having you here, it has saved me." And for Veronica, hearing those words was everything. Her heart was full. She felt that she had done the right thing. She had seen her son in pain, and she had come to help him heal. This was her purpose. This was a mother's love. She was happy, truly happy. But happiness sometimes can be a fragile thing. One evening, about a year after Veronica had moved in, the phone rang. Steve answered it. Veronica was in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes. At first, she did not pay much attention, but then she noticed the change in Steve's voice. He was speaking in a low, quiet tone. He turned his back to her, as if he did not want her to hear. When he hung up the phone, he stood there for a long time, just staring at the wall. "Who was that, dear?" Veronica asked, drying her hands on a towel. Steve turned around slowly. There was a strange look on his face, a mix of surprise and something else, something she could not quite name. "That was Jessica," he said quietly. Veronica's heart gave a little jump. Jessica. It was a name she had not heard in a very long time, a name that brought back memories of worry and sadness. "Oh," was all she said. She waited for him to say more. She wants to meet me," Steve continued, not looking at his mother. "She wants to have a coffee. She said she needs to talk to me. She said she's sorry." Veronica felt a cold knot of worry form in her stomach. She remembered the coldness in Jessica's eyes. She remembered the cruel words. But she looked at her son, and she saw the confusion on his face. He was a grown man. She could not tell him what to do. She had to trust him. "Well," Veronica said, her voice gentle and careful, that is surprising. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Steve said. "I told her I would think about it."
A few days later, Steve told her that he was going to meet Jessica. "It's just coffee, Mom," he said when he saw the look of concern on Veronica's face. "I just want to hear what she has to say, that's all." But it was not just coffee. It was the beginning. When Steve came back from that meeting, he was quiet. He seemed to be lost in thought. Veronica asked him how it went. "It was okay," he said. "She's changed, Mom. She really has. She was very sorry for everything. She cried. She said leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life." Veronica just nodded. In her heart, she did not believe it. People like Jessica did not change so easily. But she kept her thoughts to herself. She did not want to push her son away. They started meeting more often, first for coffee, then for dinner. Jessica was on her very best behavior. She was sweet to Steve. She was charming. She told him everything he wanted to hear. She told him that she had been foolish and selfish, and that she had spent the last year realizing that he was the only man she had ever truly loved. And Steve, who was still lonely deep down, began to believe her. Then, very slowly, very cleverly, Jessica began her real work. She began to plant tiny seeds of poison in Steve's mind. The poison was always about one person, his mother. It started with small comments. "Your mother is so sweet," Jessica would say with a perfect, innocent smile. "It's so wonderful that she takes care of you like this. But doesn't it feel a little strange, a grown man like you having his mommy live with him?" At first, Steve would defend Veronica. "She's not just living with me," he would say. "She helped me when I was at my lowest point. I was a mess after the divorce." "Oh, I know," Jessica would reply, her voice full of fake sympathy. "And that was so good of her. But I just worry about you. I feel like maybe our marriage failed because we never had a chance to be on our own. Your mother was always there, not in the house, but always in your head. Maybe I felt like I could never compete with her." She was very good with her words. She twisted the truth just enough to make it sound believable. She made Veronica's love sound like control. She made her care sound like interference. And slowly, drop by drop, the poison began to work. Steve started to look at his life differently. When he came home and his mother had cooked him a nice meal, a new thought would enter his mind, a thought that was not his own. "She's treating me like a child." When she would ask him about his day, he would hear Jessica's voice in his head, "She's trying to control you." He started to change. He became distant. He stopped talking to Veronica about his life. He would come home from work, eat his dinner in silence, and then go to his room to talk on the phone with Jessica for hours. The warmth in the house began to disappear. It was replaced by a tense, uncomfortable silence. Veronica could feel her son slipping away from her, and she did not know why. Her heart was filled with a deep, confusing pain. She tried to talk to him one evening,
Steve, is everything all right? You seem so far away lately. Did I do something to upset you? Steve looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flash of anger in his eyes. It was a cold anger, an anger she had never seen from him before.
"Everything is fine, Mom," he said, his voice sharp. "Maybe you should just stop worrying about me so much. I'm not a little boy anymore. I can take care of myself." His words hit her like a slap in the face. She had spent her entire life worrying about him, caring for him. It was all she had ever done. Now he was throwing her love back at her as if it were a bad thing. The arguments started to become more frequent. They were always about small, silly things. "Why did you move my papers on my desk?" he would snap at her. "I had them organized." "I was just dusting, dear," she would explain, her heart beating fast. "Well, don't. Just leave my things alone," he would shout. Another time, he complained about the food she cooked. "This is too salty, Mom. Can't you get anything right?" Veronica just stared at her plate, her eyes filling with tears. She had been cooking for him his whole life. He had always loved her cooking. What had changed? She knew what had changed. It was Jessica. She was back in his life, and she was turning her son against her. Veronica felt a wave of despair wash over her. She was losing him. She was losing her boy to that woman's lies. The worst fight came one Saturday afternoon. Steve had just come back from a lunch with Jessica. He walked into the house with a dark, angry look on his face. "Jessica told me something today, Mom," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What is it, Steve?" asked Veronica, her heart sinking. "She told me that the real reason she left me, the real reason our marriage ended, was because of you." Veronica was speechless. "What? That is a lie. Steve, you were there. She gave you a choice, her or me, and you chose me. You told me that yourself." "That's not what she says." Steve's voice was getting louder now. "She said you were always poisoning me against her. You were always saying bad things about her behind her back. You wanted us to break up because you couldn't stand to see me happy with anyone else. You wanted me all to yourself." Veronica felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. She looked at her son, at this man she had raised from a baby, and she could not believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. He was believing these terrible, twisted lies over her. "Steve, that is not true," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You are my only son, my only child. Your happiness is all I have ever wanted in this world. I would never, ever do anything to hurt you." "I don't believe you anymore," he said, his eyes as cold as ice. "Jessica was right about you all along. You are the reason my life is a mess." He turned and walked away, slamming his bedroom door behind him. Veronica was left standing alone in the living room, her body shaking with sobs. The heart that had once been so full of love and pride was now shattered into a million pieces. A cold wind was blowing through her son's heart, a wind that had been sent by Jessica. But Veronica, in her pain and confusion, could never have imagined the terrible, violent storm that was about to break.
After that terrible argument, the house became a place of deep, cold silence. The warmth that Veronica had brought with her was gone, chased away by the angry words of her son. She felt like a stranger in his home, a guest who was no longer welcome. She started to make herself small, to take up as little space as possible. She would stay in her room for most of the day, reading her books, trying not to be in his way. She would come out only to cook and to clean, moving through the house like a quiet ghost. She did these things because it was all she knew how to do. Taking care of him was a part of her, like the beating of her own heart.
She hoped with a desperate and painful hope that if she was just quiet enough, just good enough, her old son would come back. Steve treated her like she was invisible. He would walk past her in the hallway without a word. He would sit at the dinner table, eating the food she had cooked for him, and stare at his phone the entire time. He no longer shared his day with her. He no longer laughed. He was a hard, closed-off man, and Veronica's heart ached every time she looked at him. She would lie awake at night in the guest bedroom listening. She would hear the low murmur of his voice as he talked on the phone with Jessica for hours. She could not hear the words, but she could imagine them. She could imagine the poison that Jessica was dripping into his ear night after night, turning him against the only mother he had ever known. Veronica felt so lost. She would look in the mirror and see the face of a tired, sad old woman. What had she done wrong? She had loved him too much. Was that a crime? She had given him her whole life, and now it felt like her life was worth nothing to him. She would often cry silently into her pillow so he would not hear the sounds of her breaking heart. One morning, after Steve had left for work, Veronica decided she needed to do something. She could not stand the heavy, sad feeling in the house any longer. She decided to clean. She would clean the whole house from top to bottom. She would make it shine. Maybe, she thought with a flicker of hope, maybe if he comes home to a beautiful, clean house, it will make him happy. Maybe it will remind him of how much she cared. She put on her old cleaning apron and got to work. She dusted the furniture. She vacuumed the carpets. She washed the windows until they sparkled in the sunlight. It felt good to be busy, to do something with her hands. For a few hours, she could almost forget the coldness in her son's eyes. She was in the living room, sweeping the floor. She was humming a little tune to herself, a song she used to sing to Steve when he was a baby. The living room was large, and on one of the walls hung a big round clock. It was a beautiful clock, one that Steve had bought a few years ago. He was very proud of it. Veronica was sweeping near that wall. She was not paying close attention. She was lost in her memories of a happier time, a time when her son would smile at her, a time when he would hug her and call her the best mom in the world. As she swept, the long handle of the broom went up a little too high. It gently touched the bottom of the clock. It was just a small tap, but it was enough. The clock wobbled on its hook for a moment, and then it fell. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud, terrible crash. The glass cover shattered into 100 tiny pieces. The hands of the clock were bent and broken. It was completely destroyed. Veronica froze. The broom fell from her hands. She stared at the broken clock on the floor, and her heart began to pound with a deep, cold fear. It was an accident, a simple, silly accident, but she knew that in Steve's eyes, this would not be a simple accident. In his new, angry world, this would be a crime. She knelt down and carefully began to pick up the larger pieces of broken glass. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She thought about trying to hide it. Maybe she could sweep up the glass and put the broken clock in the trash, and he would not notice it was gone for a few days. But she knew that would be wrong. She had always taught him to be honest, to face up to his mistakes. She had to do the same. She put the broken pieces in a small box and waited. She sat in the kitchen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and she waited for her son to come home. Every minute felt like an hour. The sun began to set, and the house grew dark. She did not turn on the lights. She just sat there in the shadows, waiting for the storm. Finally, she heard his car in the driveway. She heard his key in the door. He walked into the house and turned on the hall light. "Why is it so dark in here?" he asked, his voice already filled with irritation.
He walked into the living room and stopped. He looked at the empty space on the wall where his beautiful clock used to be. "Where is my clock?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous.
Veronica came out of the kitchen, her body trembling. "Steve," she began, her voice small and shaky. I am so sorry. There was an accident." He turned to look at her. His eyes narrowed. "What kind of accident?" "I was cleaning," she explained, her words rushing out. "I was sweeping the floor, and the broom handle, it just tapped the clock just a little bit, and it fell. I am so sorry, Steve. It was a terrible accident. We can buy a new one. I will pay for it from my savings." He did not seem to be listening to her explanation. He just stared at her, and his face began to change. The irritation was gone. It was replaced by a deep, terrifying rage. His face turned red, and his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. "An accident?" he hissed, taking a step towards her. "You were always so clumsy, so careless. You break everything you touch. That clock was expensive." I know, and I am so sorry," she pleaded, taking a step back. "Please, Steve, don't be so angry. It was just a thing. We can replace it." "A thing?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the silent house. "It's not just about the clock, it's about you. Jessica was right. You do this on purpose. You ruin everything that is mine. You ruin everything that makes me happy." He was in front of her now, towering over her. Veronica had never been afraid of her son before, but now she was terrified. The man standing in front of her was not her boy. He was a stranger with hate in his eyes. And then he did the unthinkable. He raised his hand, and he hit her. He hit his mother across the face. The force of the blow was so strong that it sent her stumbling backward. She tripped over a small rug and fell to the floor. The side of her head hit the leg of a coffee table. Pain exploded behind her eye, a sharp, blinding pain. She lay there, on the floor, completely stunned. Her mind could not understand what had just happened. Her son, her Steve, had hit her.
But he was not finished. The rage had consumed him completely. He stood over her, his face twisted with anger. "You are the reason she left me," he screamed down at her. "You are the reason I was so miserable." He kicked her. He kicked her in the side, his shoe hitting her ribs with a dull, sickening thud. A cry of pain escaped Veronica's lips. She curled herself into a small ball on the floor, trying to protect herself. She raised her arms to cover her head as he continued to shout, his cruel words hurting her more than his fists. When his rage was finally spent, he stopped. He stood there, breathing heavily, looking down at the small, broken woman on the floor. There was no regret in his eyes, no shame. There was only a cold, hard satisfaction. "You brought this on yourself," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is what you get for ruining my life. Ever since I started seeing Jessica again, ever since I started listening to her instead of you, I have felt like a man for the first time. She was right about you. She was right about everything." He turned and walked away, leaving her there on the cold floor. Veronica lay there for a long time, unable to move. Her body was a symphony of pain. Her side ached, her head was throbbing, and her eye was already beginning to swell shut. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. He had hit her, and he had done it for her, for Jessica. The realization was a final, devastating blow. It was not just a moment of anger over a broken clock. It was a punishment for not being the evil mother-in-law Jessica had painted her to be. He had hurt her to prove his loyalty to another woman. Slowly, painfully, Veronica pulled herself up from the floor. She held on to the furniture to keep herself from falling. Every part of her body screamed in protest. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the television screen. Her face was already swelling. Her eye was turning a dark shade of purple.
She was broken. He had broken her. Not just her body, but her spirit. The love she had held in her heart for him for over 30 years felt like it had turned to ash. The boy she had raised, the boy she had promised to love and protect, was gone. In his place was a monster. And in that moment, in the dark, silent house, with the taste of blood in her mouth and the cold truth in her heart, Veronica made a decision. She could not stay here. She would not stay here. She was done. She was going home, and she was never, ever coming back. For a long time, Veronica did not move from her spot in the living room. The darkness of the house was a comfort. It hid the mess. It hid the swelling on her face, and it hid the terrible empty space on the wall where the clock used to be. But the darkness could not hide the pain. The pain in her body was a deep, throbbing ache. Her ribs felt like they were on fire with every breath she took. The side of her head was a hot, tender knot of agony. But that pain, the pain of the body, was a small thing. It was a distant echo compared to the great, silent scream that was tearing through her soul. Her son, the boy she had rocked to sleep in her arms, the boy whose fever she had cooled with a damp cloth, the boy for whom she had sacrificed everything. He had done this to her. Slowly, like a very old woman, she pushed herself up. Every muscle in her body protested. She held on to the back of a sofa, her knuckles white. She had to leave. She could not spend one more minute in this house. It was not a home anymore. It was a place of violence. It was the scene of a crime against a mother's love. She did not pack a bag. All of her things, her clothes, her books, they did not matter. The only thing that mattered was getting out. She walked, one slow, painful step at a time towards the front door. She did not look at her son's room. She did not want to see the closed door that hid the monster he had become. She took her car keys from the small dish by the door. She took her purse. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was strangely calm. It was the calm that comes after a great storm when everything has been destroyed, and there is nothing left to do but walk through the wreckage. She opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. The air felt good on her hot, swollen face. She did not look back. She walked to her small, simple car, the one she had driven for 10 years. She got in, and the familiar seat felt like the only safe place in the world. She started the engine and drove away. She drove away from the big, dark house. She drove away from the son she no longer knew. She drove away from the life she had tried so hard to build for him. Her own little house was about 20 minutes away. She had kept it all these years, renting it out to a nice young couple. But they had moved out a few months ago, and the house was empty. She had been meaning to find new tenants, but she had been too busy taking care of Steve. Now, she was so grateful it was empty. It was waiting for her. It was her sanctuary. The drive was a blur. The street lights passed by like sleepy yellow stars. When she finally pulled into her own small driveway, a wave of relief washed over her, so strong it almost made her cry. This was her place,
a place he could not touch. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was a little dusty, a little stale, but it was the smell of home, her home. She turned on a small lamp in the living room. The light cast a soft, gentle glow on her own furniture, her own pictures on the wall. A picture of her parents, a picture of her from long ago smiling on a beach. There were no pictures of Steve here. This place was just about her, Veronica. She walked into the small bathroom and turned on the light, and for the first time, she saw herself in the mirror.
The woman who looked back at her was a stranger. Her face was a mess of color. Her left eye was almost completely swollen shut, surrounded by a dark, ugly ring of purple and blue. Her cheek was puffy and red. There was a small, dried streak of blood on her lip. She looked broken, beaten. She stared at her reflection for a long time. The shock of what she was seeing was like a second blow. This was not just a feeling anymore. This was real. This was proof. This was the face of her son's betrayal. The tears that she had been holding back finally came. They were not loud, hysterical tears. They were silent, hot tears that fell from her one good eye and traced a path down her swollen cheek. She cried for the mother she used to be. She cried for the son she had lost, and she cried for the 30 years of love that had ended like this, with a broken clock and a broken face in a dusty mirror. She washed her face gently with cold water, wincing as the cloth touched her bruised skin. Then she went into her own bedroom, to her own bed, and she lay down. She did not sleep. She lay there in the dark, and she thought. Her mind went back, all the way back to the beginning. She thought about the day she had brought him home from the orphanage, the tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. The promise she had made to him and to herself. I will protect you always. She had kept that promise. She had protected him from the truth that he was found in the trash, the truth that his own birth parents did not want him. She had given him her name, her home, her love. She had built a wall of love around him so that the sadness of his beginning would never touch him. She had done it all to spare him pain. The irony was so cruel, it was almost funny. She had spent her whole life protecting him from a painful truth, only to have him inflict a real, physical, brutal pain upon her. He had become the very thing she had tried to save him from, a person who could abandon someone who loved him. Lying there, in the quiet of her old room, the love in her heart began to change. It did not disappear, but it cooled, it hardened. It turned from something soft and warm into something cold and sharp and clear. He was not the little boy she needed to protect anymore. He was a man who had made a terrible choice, a man who had listened to the poison of a selfish woman and had used it to justify hurting his own mother. The love was still there, a deep, aching root in her soul, but another feeling was growing alongside it now. A feeling of resolve, a feeling of justice. He had broken her son's clock. He had broken his mother's body, but he would not break her spirit. She had given him everything. Now she was going to take it all back. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, Veronica sat up. The pain was still there, a constant dull fire. But her mind was made up. The tears were gone. Her eyes were clear. She knew what she had to do. First, she would call her lawyer. She had a will that left everything she owned to her beloved son Steve. She would change it. She would disown him. He would not get her house. He would not get her savings. He would get nothing. He was no longer her heir. He was no longer her son. Second, she would call the bank. When he had bought that big, expensive house, he needed a guarantor for the loan, someone to promise the bank that if he could not pay, they would.
Veronica had signed those papers without a second thought. She had put her own financial safety on the line for him. She would call the bank, and she would have her name removed. Let him stand on his own 2 feet, like a real man. Let him see how easy life was without his mother's support. And third, and this was the hardest part, she would go to the police. This was not just a family argument that had gone too far. This was a crime. What he did was called assault. It was illegal. He could not be allowed to get away with it. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, not just from her, but from the law. She would not hide his shame. She would not protect him from this. This was the new promise she made to herself, lying in her bed with a bruised and broken face. She had spent her life protecting him from the truth. Now she would use the truth to protect herself. The age of secrets was over. The age of consequences had just begun.
The morning after the most terrible night of her life, Veronica did not stay in bed. She rose with the sun, each movement a painful reminder of what had happened. She looked in the mirror again. The bruising around her eye had deepened overnight, turning it dark, angry purple. It was the face of a victim. But inside, she did not feel like a victim. She felt like a soldier preparing for a battle she never wanted to fight. Her first phone call was to her lawyer, a kind older man named Mr. Harris, whom she had known for years. When his secretary put her through, his voice was warm and friendly. "Veronica, how are you this fine morning?" he asked cheerfully. Veronica took a deep breath. "Mr. Harris," she said, and her voice was a hoarse, quiet whisper, "I need to see you today. I need to change my will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Harris could hear the pain in her voice. "Of course, Veronica," he said, his tone now serious and concerned. "Is everything all right?" "No," she said simply. "Nothing is all right. I will be at your office in an hour." Before she left her house, she did something she thought she would never have the courage to do. She took a picture. She held her phone up and took a clear, bright picture of her bruised and swollen face. She did not cry. She just looked at the image on the screen. This was her evidence. This was the truth. At the lawyer's office, Mr. Harris's kind face fell when he saw her. He gently led her into his private office and closed the door. "My dear God, Veronica, what on earth happened to you?" And for the first time, she told the story. She told him everything. She told him about Jessica's lies, about Steve's anger, and about the broken clock. She told him how her son, the son she had raised and loved, had hit her and kicked her. As she spoke, she did not cry. Her voice was flat and steady. She was just stating the facts. When she was finished, Mr. Harris was silent for a long time. He looked at her with a deep sadness. Finally, he spoke. "Veronica, this is not just a family matter. This is assault. You must go to the police." "I know," she said, her voice firm. "That is my last stop today. First, I need you to help me. I want to remove Steve from my will. Completely. He is to get nothing. I want everything I own to be donated to the orphanage where I found him." Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "I understand. We can do that right away." Next, they called the bank. She explained the situation, that she was no longer willing to be the guarantor on her son's mortgage. The bank manager was understanding, and they began the official process to remove her name. Leaving the lawyer's office, Veronica felt a strange sense of lightness. She had cut the ropes. The financial ropes that tied her to her son were now being severed one by one. She had spent her life giving to him. Now that was over. Meanwhile, in the big, silent house, Steve woke up late. His head was pounding. For a moment, he couldn't remember why he felt so strange. Then it all came rushing back. The argument, the broken clock, her mother on the floor. He felt a small, ugly flicker of something that might have been guilt, but he quickly pushed it down. He told himself it was her fault. She had pushed him. She had been clumsy. She had ruined his things.
He went into the living room. The broken pieces of the clock were gone. The floor was clean. He walked through the house. Her bedroom door was open and the bed was neatly made, but she was gone. Her car was gone. He felt a moment of panic. Where did she go? Then the anger returned, fed by Jessica's poisonous words. She's just doing this for attention. She's trying to make me feel guilty. She's probably at her own house, waiting for me to come and apologize. Well, he decided, he was not going to apologize.
He picked up his phone and called the one person he knew would understand. He called Jessica. "Hey," he said when she answered. "Can you come over? Something happened." When Jessica arrived, she walked into the house with a bright, cheerful smile. "Hi, honey. What's wrong? You sounded so serious on the phone." Steve told her what had happened. He told her about the broken clock, the argument, and what he had done to his mother. As he spoke, he watched her face, waiting for her reaction. At first, Jessica put on a show. She put her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with fake shock. "Oh, Steve, you didn't! You hit her! Oh my goodness, that's so harsh! You shouldn't have done that!" She sounded concerned like any normal person would. She was a very good actress. Steve felt that flicker of guilt again. "I know," he mumbled. I lost control. I was so angry." Jessica came and sat next to him on the sofa. She put a comforting hand on his arm. She waited a moment, letting her fake sympathy sink in. Then her tone changed. Her voice became a low, sweet whisper, like a snake in a garden. "But you know," she said, looking into his eyes, "even though it was harsh, she kind of deserved it, don't you think?" Steve looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, think about it," Jessica said, her voice full of manipulative logic. "She has been trying to control you your whole life. She broke up our marriage. She has been standing in the way of your happiness for years. What you did, it was wrong, yes, but it was also the action of a man who is finally standing up for himself. You finally put her in her place. You showed her that you are not her little boy anymore. You are a man. My man." She leaned in and kissed him. And as she kissed him, all of Steve's guilt washed away, replaced by a feeling of pride. Jessica was right. He was a man. He had stood up for their relationship. He had chosen her. He felt strong, powerful. "She left," Steve told her. "I think she went back to her own house." "Good," Jessica said with a bright, triumphant smile. "Now this house can finally be ours, just you and me, no one else to interfere." She looked around the big, clean living room. "In fact," she said, her eyes sparkling, "why don't I just move my things in today? There's no reason to wait, is there?" And so, while Veronica was at the police station, her face a bruised and painful testament to her son's betrayal, Jessica was happily moving her expensive clothes into Veronica's old room. She was replacing Veronica's simple things with her own, erasing her, claiming the house as her own territory. Veronica's last stop of the day was the hardest. She walked into the local police station. The local police officer there, a kind-looking woman, saw her face, and her expression immediately filled with concern. Veronica did not have to say a word. She was led to a small private room, and she told her story one more time. She showed the officer the picture she had taken on her phone. She was calm. She was clear. She filed an official report.
When she walked out of the police station and into the late afternoon sun, she felt no victory. She felt no satisfaction. She just felt a deep, profound sadness. She had done what she had to do. The slow, heavy wheels of justice were now turning. That evening, 2 police officers knocked on the door of Steve's big house. Jessica answered, wearing one of Steve's shirts, looking completely at home. Steve came to the door, and when he saw the police, his face went pale. The pride and power he had felt just hours before vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold, sickening fear. "Steve," one of the officers said, reading from a notepad, "we have a report of an assault that took place here last night. We need you to come with us." As they put him in the back of the police car, he looked at his house. The house his mother had helped him buy. The house his mother had made into a home. The house where Jessica now stood on the porch, watching with a small, unreadable smile on her face. And in that moment, Steve began to understand that the price of being Jessica's man was going to be much, much higher than he had ever imagined.
The news of Steve's arrest spread like a cold wind through his life, blowing everything apart. The company he worked for suspended him immediately. His friends, when they heard what he had done to his own mother, stopped calling. The world he had built for himself, a world of success and respect, crumbled into dust in a matter of days. He was alone, facing the terrible consequences of a single night of rage. Jessica's support, which had seemed so strong and sweet, turned out to be as fragile as glass. When she realized that Steve might lose his job, that there would be large legal fees, and that the beautiful house itself was now at risk because Veronica had withdrawn her support, the love and admiration in her eyes vanished. It was replaced by a cold, practical anger. "I can't believe this is happening," she would complain, pacing the living room of the house she had so recently claimed. "This is a disaster. How are we supposed to pay for all of this? You told me you were a successful man." She was not worried about him. She was worried about the lifestyle he provided. The foundation of their relationship was not love. It was money. And now that the money was in danger, the relationship was too. The day of the court hearing arrived. Veronica sat on one side of the courtroom, quiet and dignified. Mr. Harris was beside her. She did not look at Steve. She could not bring herself to look at him. She just stared straight ahead at the judge, her face calm, but her heart a storm of conflicting emotions. Steve sat on the other side with his lawyer. He looked like a different person. He had lost weight. His expensive suit seemed too big for him. His face was pale and filled with a fear and desperation she had never seen before. He kept trying to catch her eye, his expression pleading, but she would not give him the comfort of her gaze. The evidence was clear. There were the pictures of her bruised face. There was her testimony, delivered in a quiet, steady voice. There were the police reports. Steve did not deny what he had done. He could not. But then his lawyer brought up something new, something that Veronica never, ever wanted to be spoken aloud in a public place. In a desperate attempt to gain sympathy for his client, the lawyer began to talk about Steve's origins. He spoke of the orphanage, of the abandonment. He tried to paint a picture of a troubled man who had never known his real parents, a man who perhaps had a deep, hidden anger. And so, in the cold, formal setting of a courtroom, the secret that Veronica had guarded for over 30 years was finally revealed. The judge and the lawyers were talking, their voices a distant drone, but she could only see her son. She finally turned and looked at him. She saw his face as the truth hit him. His mouth fell open slightly. His eyes were wide with a new kind of shock, a new kind of pain. The pain of a lost child,
not just an angry man. He looked at Veronica, his eyes asking a silent, desperate question. Is it true? Veronica could only give a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, it was true. In that moment, all the anger, all the lies from Jessica, all the resentment he had been carrying, it all seemed to fall away. All that was left was a raw, devastating truth. This woman, the woman he had hurt, was not just his mother. She was the only mother he had ever had. She had chosen him. She had saved him. She had loved him when no one else in the world wanted him. And he had repaid her with violence. The judge's voice brought them back to the present. The verdict was delivered. Steve was found guilty of assault. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by a 1.5 years of community service. He was also ordered to pay a heavy fine of $150,000 to his mother for compensation for his terrible act. After the hearing was over, the courtroom slowly emptied. Jessica was already gone. She had slipped out as soon as the prison sentence was announced, disappearing from his life as quickly as she had re-entered it.
Steve was left standing there, a broken man. He saw Veronica getting ready to leave, and with a desperate cry, he went to her. He fell to his knees in front of her, right there in the empty courtroom. He did not care who saw. "Mom," he sobbed, his voice thick with a lifetime of new, unbearable pain. "Mom, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. I was a fool. I was a monster. Please, please forgive me." Veronica looked down at her son by choice, not by blood. Her heart, which she thought had turned to stone, ached with a deep maternal pity. She reached out and gently touched his head. "I forgive you, Steve," she whispered, and the words were true. In her heart, the anger had finally given way to a profound sadness. "I forgive you for hurting me, but forgiveness does not erase what happened." He looked up at her, his eyes full of a desperate, childish hope. "Can I come home? After everything? Can we be a family again?" Veronica slowly shook her head. The tears she had held back for so long finally began to fall. "No, my son," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I will not let you back into my house, and there will be no inheritance. I told you that I would always protect you, but I cannot protect you from yourself. You are a man now. You have to learn to survive like every other man. You have to build your own life, a life of goodness and honesty from the very beginning." It was the hardest thing she had ever had to say. It was an act of love, but it was a tough love, a love that had to let go. The years that followed were difficult. Steve served his time in prison. It was a hard, humbling experience that changed him forever. When he got out, he had nothing. No job, no house, no money. He had to start his life over from the very bottom. He worked hard at simple jobs, and he did his community service, speaking to groups about anger and domestic violence. He never tried to contact Veronica again. He respected her wishes. He knew he had to earn his place in the world on his own. Veronica lived quietly in her little house. She used the money from the fine to help the orphanage where she had found Steve so many years ago. She never got married. She never had another child. Steve was, and always would be, her only son. One day, many years later, she received a letter in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a simple card. On the card, in neat, careful handwriting, it said, "Dear Mom, I hope you are well. I have a good job now and a small apartment. I am getting married next month. Her name is Sarah, and she is a kind and gentle woman. I told her everything about my past,
and she has helped me become a better man. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I wanted you to know that I am trying. I am trying every day to be the man you always deserved as a son. Thank you for my life. Thank you for everything. I will love you forever. Steve. Veronica held the letter to her heart, and she wept. They were tears of sadness for all that had been lost, but they were also tears of a quiet, hopeful peace. He was on his own path now. He was finally standing on his own 2 feet. And maybe, just maybe, he had finally learned the true meaning of love. Dear viewers, this story teaches us that love is not just about giving. Sometimes it is about letting go. And it shows us that the deepest betrayals can come from the ones we love the most. But it also teaches us that even after the darkest storms, a person can change. They can learn from their terrible mistakes and begin the long, hard journey back towards the light. Do you support Veronica's actions and decisions? Would you have let Steve back into your home if you were Veronica? Share your thoughts with the community in the comments section. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story has moved you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time, be kind to one another. Always remember, at Virtuous Stories, we love you.